The fork clattered against Sophie's plate, the sound slicing through our tense dinner. 6 months after Daniel's funeral, I was still trying to hold our family together with trembling hands. My daughter sat across from me, 15 years old and carrying anger like armor. My mother-in-law Margaret watched from the head of the table, her presence heavy as stone. I'd made Daniel's favorite pot roast, hoping food might bridge the gap growing between us. Sophie pushed the meat around her plate, jaw tight. "This tastes wrong," she muttered. "Dad made it better." I swallowed the hurt. "I followed his recipe exactly." "You follow everything exactly," Sophie said, voice sharp. "But you never get it right." Margaret's fork paused midair. The smallest smile touched her lips. Then Sophie said the words that shattered me. "You're useless without Dad." The room went silent. My hands froze on my napkin. Margaret's smile widened. I excused myself quietly, chair scraping against hardwood, and walked to the kitchen. Behind me I heard them laughing. I stood at the kitchen sink, tears streaming silently down my face. The sound of their laughter drifted through the doorway like poison. Sophie's voice, young and cruel. Margaret's, older and satisfied. Daniel had been gone 6 months, and already I'd become the joke, the punchline, the useless widow who couldn't even make pot roast correctly. I gripped the counter, knuckles white. Through the doorway, I heard Margaret's voice drop to a stage whisper. "Daniel always said she couldn't handle real life. He took care of everything, you know. The bills, the decisions, the important things." Sophie's response was quieter, but I caught it. "He told me that too. That mom needed him for everything." My chest tightened. Had Daniel really said those things? Or was Margaret rewriting history? I dried my tears and returned to clear the table. They'd moved to the living room. Sophie curled beside her grandmother on the couch. Neither looked at me as I gathered plates. That night, searching for Daniel's old tie for a memorial service, I found it. A sealed envelope in his briefcase. "To my wife, if anything happens." My hand shook as I held it. I sat on the edge of our bed, the envelope in my trembling hands. Daniel's handwriting, neat and precise, stared back at me. The seal was intact, the paper slightly yellowed. He'd written this before he died, before the car accident that had stolen him from us. Part of me wanted to rip it open immediately, but guilt stopped me cold. What if the letter said something that changed how Sophie remembered her father? What if it revealed secrets I wasn't ready to know? What if reading it felt like a betrayal? I turned the envelope over, studying every detail. Heavy paper, his full name written in the corner. The date, 3 weeks before he died. My heart hammered. Why had he written this? Had he known something was coming? Outside my bedroom, I heard Margaret's voice on the phone. "Yes, she's falling apart, just as we expected." Daniel knew this would happen. I slid the letter into my nightstand drawer and closed it. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I'd be brave enough to read it. The next morning, Margaret cornered me in the kitchen. Sophie had already left for school. "Lydia, we need to talk," Margaret said, pouring coffee without asking. "About what?" My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. "About Sophie's future. She needs stability, discipline, guidance. Things you're clearly struggling to provide." I set down my mug carefully. "I'm her mother. A grieving mother who can barely function," Margaret said smoothly. "I've been thinking, perhaps Sophie should come live with me for a while. Just until you're more emotionally stable." The words hit like a slap. "You want to take my daughter? I want what's best for her. Daniel would want that too." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "Besides, the will hasn't been finalized yet. There are complications with the estate. You might not even have legal rights to stay in this house." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Just something to think about," Margaret said, standing. "We'll discuss it more when Sophie comes home." After she left, I called Daniel's lawyer immediately. Mr. Grant's secretary said he'd call back. I waited by the phone, heart racing, remembering Margaret's smile. That evening, Sophie came home and dropped her backpack in the hall. "Grandma says I might move in with her." I stared at my daughter. "She what?" "She says you can't take care of me properly. That Dad told her I should live with her if anything happened to you both." Sophie's eyes were cold. "Dad said Grandma would take care of us if you couldn't." The words struck deep. Had Daniel really arranged this behind my back? Mr. Grant called 3 days later. His voice was careful, professional. "Mrs. Harper, there's been a complication with your husband's will. You need to come to my office." "What kind of complication?" "It's best discussed in person. Can you come tomorrow at 2? I agreed, hands shaking as I hung up. That evening, Margaret appeared at dinner again, uninvited. She'd been doing this more frequently, inserting herself into our lives like she had every right. "I'll come with you tomorrow," she announced. "To the lawyer's office." "How did you know about that?" Margaret smiled. "Mr. Grant's office called me too. As Daniel's mother, I have certain interests in the estate." Sophie looked between us. "What's going on?" "Nothing you need to worry about, darling," Margaret said. "Just adult business." But the next afternoon, when I walked into Mr. Grant's office, Margaret was already there. Sophie sat beside her, looking nervous. "What is she doing here?" I asked Mr. Grant. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper. They both have legal standing in this matter." My stomach dropped as we all sat down. Mr. Grant opened a folder, looking uncomfortable. Mr. Grant cleared his throat. "Mrs. Harper, your husband's will is unusual. According to the document filed 2 weeks before his death, the majority of his assets, including this house, have been left to Sophie." Blink. "To Sophie. She's 15. Under the guardianship of Margaret Harper until Sophie turns 21. The room tilted. "That's impossible. We had a will. We made it together 5 years ago. Everything was supposed to go to me, with provisions for Sophie." Margaret's face was carefully neutral, but her eyes gleamed. "Daniel made changes, Lydia. Without telling you. He must have had his reasons. Mr. Grant slid papers across his desk. I read them through blurring vision. The house, the savings, Daniel's life insurance. All of it placed in trust for Sophie, managed by Margaret. My name appeared nowhere. There must be a mistake, I whispered. I assure you, the will is legal and properly witnessed. Sophie's hand found Margaret's. They sat together like a united front while I crumbled. I stood abruptly, knocking my chair back. This isn't right. Daniel wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Margaret asked softly. Wouldn't plan for his daughter's future. Wouldn't make sure she's taken care of by someone competent. I stumbled out of the office, humiliated and broken. In the hallway, Mr. Grant caught up with me. He pressed a note into my hand. There's something else. Daniel left a private letter for you. Come back alone tomorrow. I drove home in a daze, the note burning in my pocket. That night, I retrieved the envelope from my nightstand. My hands shook as I finally broke the seal. Daniel's handwriting swam before my eyes as I unfolded the letter. My dearest Lydia, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry. I need you to understand something. The will you just heard about, it's not real. Not the true one. I had to make it look this way for now. My mother has been manipulating our finances for years. I only discovered it recently. The signatures, the accounts, everything. She's been planning something and I needed to protect you and Sophie. The truth is in the blue folder. In my office. The safe behind the bookshelf. Please find it before she does. Love you. You were never useless. You were always stronger than anyone knew. Daniel. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I rushed to his office, letter clutched in my hand. The door was ajar. Pushed it open. Margaret stood at Daniel's desk, a blue folder in her hands. Looking for this. Margaret held the folder up, her face triumphant. My heart hammered against my ribs. That's mine. Daniel left it for me. Did he? Interesting. Because I found it in his safe. His safe in his office in his house. She emphasized each word like a weapon. I stepped forward, hand outstretched. Give it to me, Margaret. I don't think so. She opened the folder casually, scanning the contents. These are just financial records. Nothing special. I need them to manage Sophie's inheritance properly. Those aren't yours. Something snapped inside me. I lunged forward and grabbed the folder. Margaret held tight. We struggled, both pulling. Papers scattered across the floor like snow. Margaret stumbled back, releasing her grip. I fell to my knees, frantically gathering documents. My eyes caught on one page. A letterhead I recognized. Harper Industries. Daniel's family company. But the signature at the bottom looked wrong. I picked up another page. Then another. Stock certificates. Ownership documents. All signed by Daniel, but the signatures were slightly different. Jiggy. Not his confident hand. You forged these, I whispered, looking up at Margaret. You forged Daniel's signature. She straightened her jacket, face cold. Prove it. I held up the documents, hands shaking. These ownership shares. They're worth millions. But Daniel's signature is wrong. Look at the date. He was in the hospital that day. He couldn't have signed these. Margaret's expression didn't change. You're hysterical. Grief does that to people. These documents transfer company shares to you. Gradually. Over the past 2 years. I shuffled through more papers. You've been stealing from your own son. I've been protecting family assets, Margaret said coldly. Something Daniel's marriage put at risk. What does that mean? It means my son married someone beneath him. Someone who brought nothing to this family but dependency. I've been securing Sophie's future from the moment you two got married. The words were poison. But I forced myself to focus. These documents were proof. Proof that Margaret had been manipulating Daniel's estate. Maybe his death wasn't an accident at all. That thought made my blood run cold. Get out of this house, I said quietly. This is Sophie's house now. And I'm her guardian. Margaret smiled as she walked past me. For now. After Margaret left, I gathered every document and locked myself in Daniel's office. My phone buzzed. Sophie's name on the screen. Mom, Grandma says you attacked her. She says you're having a breakdown. My daughter's voice was distant, already convinced. Sophie, I need you to listen. Your grandmother has been lying. About everything. You're just jealous she's taking care of me. No, sweetheart. She's been stealing from our family. From your father. That's crazy. You sound crazy. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, then at the scattered papers. Sophie was slipping away from me, poisoned by Margaret's lies. I couldn't lose her too. That night, desperate, I planted a small voice recorder under the living room couch. If I could just catch Margaret admitting something, anything. 2 days later I retrieved it. Hands shaking I pressed play. Margaret's voice filled my kitchen. The girl is easy to manipulate, just like her father was. A little money, a little attention, and she'll do anything I say. Sophie's voice, younger, uncertain. But Mom loves me. Your mother is weak. She always has been. That's why Daniel made sure I'd be your guardian. He knew she couldn't handle real responsibility. What about college? You promised. Of course, darling. I'll pay for everything. As long as you support me. As long as you help me keep control of the estate. My heart shattered listening to it. Sophie had been bribed. My own daughter bought with promises of money. The next morning I went straight back to Mr. Grant's office. Alone this time. He looked up from his desk surprised. Mrs. Harper. I wasn't expecting you. You said yesterday that you suspected something, I said, closing the door behind me. You slipped me that note. You know something's wrong with this will. He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Daniel came to see me a week before his death. He was agitated, worried. He said he needed to change his will immediately. But he just changed it, I said. Exactly. He told me his mother had pressured him into the first change. Threatened him, actually. Said she'd contest any will that left everything to you. That she'd drag Sophie through a legal battle. So the will you read, that's the one Margaret forced him to make. Yes, but Daniel was working on a new one. Real one. He said he had proof his mother had been stealing from the family company. Forging documents. Mr. Grant opened a drawer and pulled out a file. He gave me this. Said I should only open it if something happened to him. Inside were photocopies of the forged signatures. Comparisons to Daniel's real handwriting. Bank statements showing money transferred to Margaret's accounts. Why didn't you tell me this before? Yes. Because legally I needed more proof. But I think you might have it. Daniel mentioned a blue folder. I pulled the documents from my bag and spread them across his desk. Mr. Grant studied them carefully, nodding slowly. This is enough. We can contest the will. But we'll need more. We need to prove Daniel was under duress. That his death might not have been an accident. The word accident hung in the air between us. His car, I whispered. Someone tampered with his car. Mr. Grant met my eyes. There's one person who might know. Daniel's business partner, Eli Turner. Eli Turner agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. He was in his 50s, gray at the temples with worried eyes. I'm sorry for your loss, Lydia, he said as we sat in a back corner. Daniel talked about you all the time. Did he talk about his mother? Eli's expression darkened. All the time. Especially those last few months. What did he say? That Margaret was trying to take over the company. That she'd been manipulating the board, forging signatures on transfer documents. Daniel was putting together evidence to confront her. My hands wrapped around my coffee cup. Do you think she killed him? The words felt impossible, but Eli didn't flinch. I think his death was very convenient for her. The car crash, the brake failure. It was ruled accidental. But Daniel had just told me he was going to the police. Why didn't you say something? I did. But without proof no one believed me. Margaret's very good at appearing innocent. Eli leaned forward. Daniel left something for you. He made me promise to protect it until you were ready. What is it? Evidence. Everything he'd collected on his mother. It's in a safe. Daniel said only you would know the code. My mind raced. What code? He said to think of your wedding day. Our wedding day. The happiest day of my life. The day I became Lydia Harper. The date. More specific than that. He said you'd know. I thanked Eli and drove home with my mind spinning. Our wedding date. What about it would Daniel use as a code? That night, after Sophie went to bed, I stood before Daniel's safe. Hidden behind a bookshelf in his office. Just like his letter said. I'd found it earlier but hadn't known the combination. Now I did. Our wedding date was October 15th, 2009. But Daniel wouldn't use something that simple. Thought back to that day. The ceremony at sunset. The vows we'd written ourselves. The moment I became his wife. Then it hit me. The exact time. 6:47 p.m. When the judge pronounced us married. I turned the dial. 18 to 47. The safe clicked open. Inside was a treasure trove of evidence. USB drives labeled with dates. Handwritten notes in Daniel's careful script detailing meetings with Margaret. Financial records showing money siphoned from company accounts. And photos. My blood ran cold. Photos of Margaret meeting with Daniel's original lawyer. Weeks before the car crash. In one, she was handing over a document. I could see the word will at the top. Daniel had photographed her manipulating the lawyer. Another photo showed Margaret at a mechanic shop. I recognized the logo. The same shop that had inspected Daniel's car before the crash. The mechanic in the photo was handing her something small. It looked like a receipt. Or instructions. My hands shook as I gathered everything. I had proof. Proof of forgery, theft, manipulation. And possibly murder. I called Eli Turner immediately. Even though it was past midnight. I found it. Everything Daniel collected. Good. Eli's voice was alert despite the hour. Now we need to be smart about this. Margaret can't know what you have. She already suspects something. Then we move fast. I'll call the fraud investigators tomorrow. You need to protect those files. That night I made copies of everything. One set I hid in the house. Another I gave to my neighbor for safekeeping. The originals went into a safety deposit box. I barely slept, jumping at every sound. What if Margaret broke in? What if she tried to destroy the evidence? Morning came gray and cold. I was exhausted but clear-headed. Everything was starting to make sense. Daniel's strange behavior those last weeks. His insistence on updating our insurance. The way he'd held me extra tight before his last business trip. He'd known he was in danger. He tried to protect me the only way he could. By gathering evidence. By leaving me clues. By trusting I'd be strong enough to fight back. At breakfast, Sophie barely looked at me. She'd been at Margaret's house again last night. We need to talk, I said. About what? Her tone was sharp, defensive. About your grandmother. About your father. About the truth. The truth is you're jealous. Sophie stood up. Dad left everything to Grandma because he knew you couldn't handle it. Everyone knows that. Your father was murdered. The words fell like stones. Sophie froze. What? Murdered. By your grandmother. And I can prove it. For the first time in months, I saw doubt flicker in my daughter's eyes. Sophie stared at me, her face pale. That's insane. Grandma wouldn't. Sit down, I said firmly. Please. Something in my voice must have reached her because she sat. I pulled out my laptop and inserted one of Daniel's USB drives. Your father spent the last months of his life investigating his own mother. He discovered she'd been stealing from the family company. forging documents, manipulating accounts. Open the first file. Bank statements appeared on screen. See these transfers. All to Margaret's personal accounts. Millions of dollars over 5 years. Sophie's eyes widened. But Dad would have known. He did know. That's why he was gathering evidence. That's why he changed the will to protect us. And that's why. My voice caught. That's why I think she killed him. I showed her the photos. Margaret at the lawyer's office. At the mechanic's shop. Daniel's notes about brake problems reported 2 days before the crash. The police said it was an accident, Sophie whispered. But what if it wasn't? What if someone paid that mechanic to tamper with the brakes? I watched my daughter's face as the truth settled over her. Confusion. Denial. Then slowly, painfully, acceptance. She's been lying to me, Sophie said. About everything. Yes. She said you were weak. That Dad didn't trust you. That I needed her more than you. I reached across the table and took my daughter's hand. Your father trusted me with this evidence. With the truth. With protecting you. That's not weakness, Sophie. That's strength. Tears streamed down her face. I'm so sorry, Mom. I said terrible things. I know. But Margaret manipulated you. Just like she manipulated your father. Sophie wiped her eyes, and I saw something new in her expression. Determination. What do we do now? Together, Sophie and I made a plan. She would continue acting like nothing changed, spending time with Margaret. Meanwhile, I'd work with Mr. Grant and Eli to build our case. But I wanted Sophie to see the truth firsthand. I gave her a small USB drive. On here is a recording of Margaret admitting she manipulated you, that she bribed you with college money. You need to hear it. That evening, Sophie locked herself in her room. An hour later, she emerged with red eyes. She doesn't love me, Sophie said. She just sees me as a tool. I'm sorry you had to learn that. I'm going over there tomorrow. She asked me to come for dinner. Should I still go? I thought about it carefully. Yes, but wear this. I handed her my smallest voice recorder. Hidden in a pen. Try to get her talking about your father. About the will. Anything. Sophie held the pen like it was a weapon. I can do this. The next evening, Margaret picked Sophie up as planned. I waited at home, anxious and alert. 3 hours later, Sophie returned. Her face was pale but composed. I got it, she whispered. She talked about everything. We listened to the recording together. Margaret's voice filled my kitchen, cold and calculating. Your father was always too soft, too emotional. He would have given everything away to charity if I hadn't stepped in. Sophie's voice, carefully neutral. But he left things to Mom in the original will, didn't he? That pathetic document. I had it destroyed. Your father wrote it before he understood reality. Before he understood his responsibilities to this family. So you made him change it. I guided him to make the right decision. And when he tried to change it back, well, sometimes accidents happen at very convenient times. My blood ran ice cold. She'd admitted it. Not directly, but enough. Armed with the recording, the documents, and Eli's testimony, Mr. Grant prepared our case. But before taking it to the police, I wanted one final confrontation. I invited Margaret for dinner at our house. Our home, I reminded myself. Not hers. She arrived punctual and suspicious. What's this about, Lydia? Family dinner, I said simply. Sophie wanted you here. Sophie sat at the table, her expression carefully neutral. We'd rehearsed this. Margaret took her seat, eyes darting between us. Over pot roast I watched her. This woman who'd stolen from us. Manipulated my daughter. Possibly murdered my husband. Margaret, I said calmly. We need to discuss something. Oh, she sipped her wine. Yes, Daniel left me something. Letter. Several letters, actually. And documents. Evidence of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Her hand froze on her wine glass. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out the folder and laid photographs on the table, one by one. These are you meeting with Daniel's lawyer, pressuring him to change the will. These are you at the mechanic's shop. These are forged signatures on company documents. Margaret's face drained of color. Where did you get these? From your son. He knew what you were doing. He spent months gathering proof. I played the recording from Sophie's visit. Margaret's own words condemning her. You manipulated a child. You stole millions. And you killed my husband. Margaret stood abruptly. You can't prove any of this. Actually, Mr. Grant's voice came from the doorway. We can. Mrs. Harper, the police are outside. You're under arrest for fraud, coercion, and suspected involvement in Daniel Harper's death. Margaret's face transformed from shock to fury. This is ridiculous. You have no real proof. 2 officers entered the dining room. I'd called them before dinner, arranging this confrontation with Mr. Grant's help. Mrs. Margaret Harper, one officer said, you're under arrest for fraud and tampering with estate documents. We also have warrants to search your home and financial records regarding the death of Daniel Harper. As they read her rights, Margaret's eyes found mine. You'll regret this. You're not smart enough to have done this on your own. You're right, I said quietly. I had help. From my husband. He knew you'd try this. He prepared everything. Margaret struggled as they put handcuffs on her. Sophie, tell them your mother is lying. But Sophie stood beside me, hand in mine. No, Grandma, you're the liar. The officers led Margaret out. Her protests echoed down the hallway until the door closed. Then silence. Sophie collapsed into a chair, shaking. I knelt beside her. It's over. She can't hurt us anymore. I can't believe she killed Dad. Tears streamed down Sophie's face. I loved her. I trusted her. I know, sweetheart. So did your father. We held each other in our dining room, crying for everything we'd lost. Daniel, trust, family, but also beginning to heal. The next morning brought an unexpected break-in. I woke to sounds downstairs. My heart hammered as I called 911, whispering into the phone. Sophie locked her bedroom door as I taught her. By the time police arrived, the intruder was gone. But they'd ransacked Daniel's office, clearly searching for something. Files were scattered, drawers emptied. They'd even pried the safe open. Thankfully it was empty. Margaret must have sent someone, the officer said. She's allowed one phone call. She probably used it to hire this. But I have copies of everything, I told them. Multiple copies. She can't destroy the evidence. Still, the break-in shook me. Margaret was fighting back even from jail. That evening, exhausted and scared, I retreated to my bedroom. A letter. Daniel's original letter to me. I'd been so focused on the evidence that I'd forgotten to read it fully. I pulled it out and smoothed the paper. At the bottom, written in faint ink, almost invisible unless you knew to look, was a postscript. Lydia, if you're reading this PS, you've found everything. You've been strong just like I always knew you would be. One more thing. Check account number 47293 at First National. It's in your name only. I transferred majority shares of Harper Industries to you 3 days before I died. You own the company now. You always had more power than my mother wanted you to know. Love you. You were never useless without me. You were always enough. Daniel. My hands shook as I read the postscript again. I owned Harper Industries. Daniel had transferred ownership to me. I immediately called Eli Turner. Did you know about this? Yes. About what? Account 47293. Majority shares transferred to my name. Silence. Then Eli laughed, a sound of pure relief. He did it. I didn't know if he'd had time. He told me he was planning it, but that was the day before the crash. The next morning I went to First National Bank with Mr. Grant. They verified everything. Daniel had indeed transferred controlling shares of Harper Industries into my name 3 days before he died. 51% of the company. Majority ownership. Why didn't this come up before? I asked Mr. Grant. Because it's a separate asset from the will. Margaret didn't know about it. She was so focused on the house and savings, she never thought to check the company shares. I stared at the documents. Name. Lydia Harper, majority shareholder. What does this mean? It means you control everything, Mr. Grant said. Harper Industries. The company Margaret spent years trying to take over. It's yours. It always was. That evening, I gathered Sophie and told her everything. She looked at the documents in wonder. Dad left you the company. He left us the company. For our future. Sophie smiled, really smiled for the first time in months. He knew you could handle it. He trusted you. He did, I whispered. More than I trusted myself. 3 weeks later, I called a family board meeting. As majority shareholder, I had the right. The Harper Industries executives gathered in the conference room, confused. Most had never met me. Margaret had kept Daniel's wife out of company business. I stood at the head of the table, Sophie beside me. Good afternoon. My name is Lydia Harper. I'm Daniel Harper's widow and as of 3 weeks ago, the majority owner of this company. Murmurs rippled through the room. You're probably wondering what happened to Margaret Harper. She's currently under arrest for fraud, theft, and suspected involvement in my husband's death. She will not be returning to this company. I laid out the evidence, the forged documents, the stolen money, the manipulation. My husband spent his last months protecting this company and his family. He gathered proof of every crime his mother committed, and he transferred ownership to me to ensure she could never take control. One executive, an older man, stood. Mrs. Harper, with all due respect, do you have any business experience? None, I said honestly. But I learn quickly, and I have excellent advisors. Eli Turner will serve as acting CEO while I get up to speed. This company will continue operating exactly as my husband intended. I played recordings and displayed documents. By the end of the meeting, the board voted unanimously to support the ownership transfer. Margaret's lawyer tried to contest it, but with her arrest and the mountain of evidence, the court sided with me. Harper Industries was officially mine. Margaret's trial began 2 months later. The courtroom was packed. Media covered every moment. Wealthy widow arrests mother-in-law for murder. The headlines were sensational. But sitting in that courtroom, watching prosecutors lay out the case, all I felt was sadness. This woman who'd given birth to Daniel, who'd raised him, she destroyed everything out of greed. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged signatures, stolen money, testimony from the mechanic who admitted Margaret had paid him to tamper with Daniel's brakes. She said it would look like an accident, he testified. Said no one would ever know. She paid me $50,000. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke clearly and calmly. I told them about Daniel's investigation, the letter he'd left, the evidence he'd gathered knowing he might die. My husband was protecting us from his own mother, I said. He knew what she was capable of, and he made sure that even in death, he could keep us safe. Sophie testified too, about the manipulation, the bribes, the way Margaret had turned her against me. She made me believe my mother was weak, Sophie said, voice shaking. But my mom is the strongest person I know. She fought for the truth when everyone told her to give up. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts, fraud, coercion, conspiracy to commit murder. Margaret received 25 years. She'd die in prison. As they led her away, she looked at me one final time. You won, she said bitterly. He always underestimated you. I did too. Yes, I said quietly. You did. The months after the trial were strange, healing but difficult. Sophie started therapy to work through the trauma of her grandmother's betrayal. I feel stupid, she admitted one evening, for believing her. For hurting you. You were manipulated by someone who'd spent a lifetime perfecting lies, I said. That's not your fault. But I said you were useless without Dad. I believed it. I pulled her close. And I proved you wrong. We both did. We're stronger than anyone thought. Sophie started coming to the company with me, learning the business her father had built. At first, executives were skeptical of the widow and her teenage daughter. But we proved ourselves. Eli guided us, teaching us everything Daniel had known. By the anniversary of Daniel's death, we'd not only maintained the company but grown it. Profits were up. Employee satisfaction improved. We'd cut out the corruption Margaret had seeded. One evening, Sophie and I visited Daniel's grave. She placed flowers on the headstone. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. "I hope we're making you proud." I stood beside her, hand on her shoulder. "He is proud. I know he is. Do you miss him?" Sophie asked. "Every day. But I'm grateful for what he left us. Not just the company or the evidence. He left us the truth. And the strength to fight for it." 6 months later, Harper Industries held a memorial event for Daniel. We'd established a foundation in his name for business ethics and corporate responsibility. The ballroom was filled with employees, partners, clients, people who'd known and respected my husband. I stood at the podium, Sophie beside me. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "We're here to honor Daniel Harper, a man who believed in integrity, family, and doing what's right, even when it's hard." I pulled out Daniel's letter, the one he'd left for me. Before he died, my husband wrote me a letter. "I'd like to share part of it with you tonight." I read his words about love, about strength, about believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Daniel saw something in me I couldn't see. He knew that love doesn't make us weak, makes us brave. He knew that being a wife and mother wasn't a sign of dependency. It was a choice, a strong choice. My voice wavered but held. His mother tried to paint me as useless, incapable, someone who needed a man to survive. But Daniel knew better. He left me everything I needed to prove her wrong. Not just money or ownership. He left me the truth. And the courage to speak it. The room was silent, many dabbing at their eyes. So tonight we honor Daniel, not just as a businessman or a son, but as a husband and father who believed in the strength of the people he loved, who gave us the tools to fight for ourselves. Sophie squeezed my hand as applause filled the room. 2 years after Daniel's death, Sophie and I stood in the living room of our home, packing boxes. Not to leave but to renovate. We decided to make the house truly ours. Remove the shadows of Margaret's presence. Create new memories. "Mom, look what I found." Sophie held up a photograph. Daniel and I on our wedding day, laughing in the sunset. Young and hopeful and completely unaware of what was coming. I took it gently. "Your father loved you so much. Everything he did, even the dangerous investigation, he did to protect you. I know. I wish I could tell him I understand now. He knows, sweetheart." Sophie had blossomed over the past 2 years. She was 17 now, confident, planning to study business at college. She worked part-time at Harper Industries, learning every department. "I want to run the company someday," she told me last month. "Like Dad wanted. Like you're doing now." "Then you will," I'd said. "We'll run it together." That evening, we drove to the cemetery one last time before the renovation began. I carried Daniel's letter, worn now from being read and reread. At his grave, I knelt and placed the letter against the headstone. "You didn't just leave me a letter, Daniel," I whispered. "You left me my strength. You showed me I was never useless, never weak, never dependent. I was always capable. I just needed to believe it." Sophie stood beside me, hand on my shoulder. "We did it, Dad," she said softly. "We proved everyone wrong. We saved the company. We got justice. We're okay now." I stood brushing dirt from my knees. The letter remained, weighted down with a smooth stone. "Should we take it?" Sophie asked. "No, let it stay. He knows we read it. He knows we understood. That's what matters." We walked back to the car as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, just like our wedding day. "Mom," Sophie said as we drove home, "you know what the best part is." "What's that?" "You didn't just prove Grandma wrong. You proved yourself right. You were always strong. You just finally let yourself see it." I smiled, tears blurring my vision. "We both did, sweetheart. We both did." 3 months later, Harper Industries announced record profits. The business magazines wanted interviews. The widow who became a CEO. How Lydia Harper saved her husband's company. I did one interview. Just one. The reporter asked the inevitable question. "What would you say to other women who feel trapped or underestimated?" I thought carefully before answering. "I'd say that other people's opinions of you don't define your worth." My mother-in-law thought I was useless. My daughter believed it for a while. Even I wondered if it was true. But my husband knew better. He left me proof of my own strength. Sometimes we need someone to believe in us first. But eventually we have to believe in ourselves. Do you ever wish you could tell your mother-in-law that you won? No, because this was never about winning. It was about truth. About protecting my daughter. About honoring my husband's final wishes. Margaret lost because she chose greed and cruelty. I succeeded because I chose love and courage. The article ran with a photo of Sophie and me at the company headquarters. 2 generations of Harper women, standing strong. Daniel's legacy wasn't just the company he'd built or the evidence he'd gathered. It was the family he'd protected. The truth he'd preserved. The strength he'd seen in me when no one else did. That night, I stood at my bedroom window looking out at the city lights. Sophie was asleep down the hall. Our home was safe. Our future was secure. The nightmare was over. I pulled out a new journal, opened to the first blank page and wrote, "Dear Daniel, 2 years ago, Sophie called me useless without you. She was wrong. But I understand why she thought it. I'd spent so long letting you lead that I forgot I could walk on my own. Thank you for reminding me. Thank you for the letter, the evidence, the shares, the trust. Thank you for believing I could do this. I did. We did. Sophie and I saved everything you built. We exposed the truth. We're thriving. You were right. I was never useless. I was never weak. I was always strong enough. I just needed to remember. Rest easy, my love. We're okay now. We're more than okay. We're free. With all my love, Lydia. I closed the journal and placed it in my nightstand, right where Daniel's letter had been. Tomorrow Sophie and I would go to work. We'd make decisions about the company. We'd build on the foundation Daniel had created. We'd continue proving that strength comes in many forms. But tonight I simply breathed. Grateful for the husband who'd seen me clearly. For the daughter who'd learned to see me clearly too. For the strength I'd found within myself. Sophie had said I was useless without Dad. Then she saw the letter he left me. The letter that changed everything. Not because it gave me power I didn't have, but because it revealed the power I'd always possessed.